We're now recording.
This is the meeting of the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Committee on March 22, 2022. We have a quorum, and I call this meeting to order at 8:35 a.m. Members, to comply with the Open Meeting Act, if you could all please turn your cameras on. We have to have your cameras on if you're participating remotely. All right, why don't we start with the roll call, please?
Brent Rubin.
Here.
Deborah Carpenter. Dustin Bullard.
Here.
Jasmine Anderson. Jennifer Rangel.
Here.
I'm sorry, was that a here?
Yes, I hear.
Thank you. Jerry Hawkins.
Here.
Kristen Nightingale. Linda McMahon.
Here.
Lynette Aguilar.
Here.
Maggie Parker. Maria Gomez. Matt Houston.
Here.
Peter Goldstein.
Here.
Robert Kent. Roy Lopez.
Here.
And that is it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have a quorum. We're going to start off with our workshop today, and we have some public speakers that we're going to hear from first on this item before jumping into the workshop itself. So today our public speakers are going to have 3 minutes apiece to speak, and our first public speaker is Commissia Richardson. Is Ms. Richardson online? Let's circle back around to Ms. Richardson. Our next public speaker is Larry Johnson. Is Mr. Johnson online? He doesn't appear to be online either. Our next public speaker, Marcia Jackson, and I see she's online as an attendee. Can we promote her to a participant? There we go. And Ms. Jackson, if you could please turn your camera on. The Open Meetings Act requires that remote participants. There we go. Good morning, Ms. Jackson.
Morning. I'm gonna start speaking this morning. I had a medical procedure, but my name is Marcia Jackson. I live in Dallas, Texas. I am coming to you guys, and I want to speak on behalf of the Coalition for the Neighborhood Association. And I think it is very important that the neighborhood be able to have a voice and for neighborhood-led issues. One reason is because of the experience that I have had because of that. And if we had had a voice and people really listened to us, that some of these things may be avoided, particularly the land issues. The neighbors can speak on what is necessary in our community. We can see things that you cannot see, the city cannot see. And that is one experience of what I have gone through, because we continue to call 311. We continue to say what we need in the community and what we do not need, but our voices are not heard. And I want to be able to speak on this behalf of my community, my residents and neighbors, to let them know no more pollution near the neighborhood, no more polluters in our neighborhood, and the land for near residents, and no more recycling. We want to be able to engage in the development of this policy and on rezoning in this, because these things can be avoided if you do listen to the neighborhood. I wouldn't have to go through what I'm going through right now because of the voice that I have, because of the polluters. So I also want to know, want to ensure that the polluters are separated from the community, not in the community, but from the community. This is very important. If you guys do not realize it, if you do not understand, you might have people come out during that time and you think it's nothing happening, but we experience that. The neighborhood experienced that. So I really hope that you will take this in importance to realize that these environmentals, these polluters are actually killing us. And to work with us, work with the neighborhood, work with the community, and listen to our voices, because we are not been heard. And I am coming forward and asking you for the plea to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Our next public speaker is Camille Kaplan, and it appears that Ms. Kaplan is also an attendee, so if we could promote her. And Ms. Kaplan, if you could please turn your camera on in order to comply with the Texas Open Meetings Act.
Yeah, sorry, 1 second. I'm in audio only mode. Let me configure it real quick.
Great, take your time. Ms. Kaplan, are you able to get your camera to work?
Yes, I am. Is it working?
Yep, there we go. All right,
Awesome.
you have 3 minutes, Ms. Kaplan. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also speaking on behalf of neighborhood organizations today. I just want to second everything that's been said about prioritizing the neighborhood voice. Something that is really important is understanding that neighborhoods can make decisions for what happens in their communities if they're given the opportunity. It's important that this plan prioritizes that voice. It's really important as well, especially as the city sees massive increases in housing costs across the city, pollution consequences being concentrated in certain areas. It's really important that any comprehensive land use planning gives neighborhoods an opportunity to determine their own fate, right? Instead of whatever a developer or the city thinks matters. That's essentially my whole comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaplan. Our next speaker is Evelyn Mayo.
Good morning. I'm trying to get my video up.
Okay, take your time. There you go. We can see you now.
Okay, great. So my name is Evelyn Mayo, and I'm also here on behalf of the Coalition for Neighborhood Self-Determination. We wanted to speak today because on your agenda, you're considering policy issues and areas to focus on in the context of Forward Dallas and land use planning. And the coalition has drafted a Bill of Rights that includes the Residents' Bill of Rights for equitable and inclusive planning. And it's 3 pillars: the right to environmental justice, the right to fair and affordable housing, and the right to self-determination. And this, I believe we've sent it to you all, but we'll send it again, but it details exactly what we're talking about when we say those 3 things. The We've also drafted a Goals for Forward Dallas one-pager that will be circulating that outlines process issues that we would like to be addressed through this comprehensive land use planning update, as well as substantive policy issues, such as proactively separating people from polluters, such as rezoning based on equity through the authorized hearing process, and having a comprehensive and clear community engagement policy. These are all things that are currently lacking at the City of Dallas that have led to the environmental injustices and fair housing issues that residents in Floral Farms, 10th Street, Elm Thicket North Park have experienced over the last few years. This coalition firmly believes that you all have an opportunity to undo decades of racist zoning and land use policy to actually close the equity gap and close the life expectancy gap that exists between North and South Dallas. And so we're really here we're hoping to go through the workshop and then provide our comments per the last meetings, but we're just grateful that you all have lent your time and expertise to this issue and encourage you to look to the residents on the front line when it comes to identifying these policy issues, because they are very clearly articulated. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the workshop.
Thank you, Ms. Mayo. And I'm not sure that I received that document that you mentioned. So if you wanted to send it to the committee again, I think that would be appreciated.
Will do. Thank you very much.
All right, let's circle back to our first couple speakers. Is Ms. Richardson or Mr. Johnson, or either of them online? I don't think I see them. Staff, do you see them there?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, then that concludes our public speakers for this item. No one's here in person. So let's move to the workshop itself. And I'll hand it over to staff.
Great, good morning. Thank you all for showing up. My name is Lawrence Agu. I think I've met some of you all in person, but it's great to see most of you all in person and also virtually. So today's only agenda item is to go through this community workshop that we did with the community last year at different locations in person and virtually. We want to provide that same opportunity for this committee to be able to provide the same type of feedback as we add to the community engagement and getting that feedback from a land use perspective for today. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and go through our rules of engagement for today, and then we'll just jump straight into the workshop. And just FYI as well, Jasmine Anderson just joined us on the chat.
Great. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Anderson joined us at 8:47 a.m.
All right, everybody can see the screen. Just want to make sure virtually everybody can see the screen. All right, so for today, I'll be joined with a few of my friends from our consulting group that's going to help facilitate our workshop. So again, my name is Lawrence Agu from Planning and Urban Design, Chief Planner within the City of Dallas, and we're going to be being helped with two people from our consulting group, Rick Leisner and Devin Levine. We'll introduce them later on into the presentation. So for our agenda, again, we're going to do a quick overview in terms of why we're doing what we're doing with this community workshop. We'll delve into quick introductions, and we're going to jump straight into the workshop. Try not to waste any of your time. We'll do a quick recap in terms of what we have discovered, and then provide next steps for this committee and Planning and Urban Design. So the purpose of this workshop, to identify overall direction and policy for land use issues facing the City of Dallas, and identify priorities for this committee for staff and the rest of the consultant team and the project team to have into consideration as we move forward with this project. So again, I already introduced myself. I'm not going to belabor the point who I am, but I wanted to introduce two people that have joined us today, Rick Leisner and also Devin Levine. I'll let Rick introduce himself first, and then we'll switch to Devin, who is joining us virtually.
Devin, would you like to go ahead and go first?
Sure. Thanks, Rick. So my name is Devin Levine. I'm one of the founders of House of Levine. We are a firm that specializes in helping cities with complex planning issues, and we do this all over the country, and we're thrilled to be working with the great city of Dallas, and we've assembled a great team of not just experts, but local experts, and thrilled to have both Norris Design, Case Strategies, and Tool Design Group on our team. And as Lawrence mentioned, I'm participating virtually. We have Rick there in person, and I'll pass it over to Rick to introduce himself and his firm.
Thanks, Devin. My name is Rick Leisner. I'm an urban planner and landscape architect and principal with Norris Design. Our office is here in Dallas, Texas. We're based out of Denver, Colorado. I've been fortunate to be here in the Dallas Metroplex area for about the last 35 years. I got here as soon as I can, and I'm quite knowledgeable of the Dallas-Fort Worth area and the city of Dallas and many of our particular land use and urban design challenges. And we're very excited to be a part of this project with Devin. Thank you.
All right, thank you all so much. So with that, I'm going to jump to our next slide. So this is going to be a kind of quick preliminary findings in terms of what we got from the community last year. Again, this is just a very high-level summary of what types of topics and findings and input that we received, but this is not an exhaustive list. This was, again, from last year. We're building upon what was provided and sent to us, and we're going to be adding to this, but just for you all to see those types of discussions that were had during these workshops. These are some of the topics that we found during that time. So without much ado, jump into a few ground rules and kind of give a quick overview of how we're going to be doing this workshop. So be ready to share your thoughts. Be respectful of other people's opinions. Always got to say that. Have a notepad or phone or paper handy. That's going to just help you process through some of the questions we're going to ask. We have 4 major questions, but we're going to elaborate on those questions throughout this workshop. I believe, Brian, in person, if you all should have some paper. If you don't have paper, he can provide that to you as well. Virtually, if you have your phone or notepad, that'll also be helpful as we talk through these questions. Be concise and keep your comments to the topic being discussed. Again, land use is where we're focusing our conversation. So we'll try to help guide and direct those questions and responses to land use specific responses. So how we're going to start, the question, I'm going to ask one question. It's going to be a round robin. So we'll start round robin with the audience in person. Then I'll transition to the audience virtually. What we're trying to do with these questions is kind of get a overview in terms of a consensus of what we want to get that relates to staff. We'll show that on the screen so everybody sees what we're saying. We'll do a few round robin going from virtual and in person just to make sure we get everybody's input, and then we'll go to the next question, do the same thing. Okay? Any questions virtually and in person? I guess as we start to go with the flow of it, it should make a little bit more sense. So hang with us. Any other thoughts? Okay, cool. All right, so the first question that we're going to be trying to answer, we want you all to identify 5 land use issues or concerns confronting Dallas. So those that you do have a paper on hand, I want to identify 5 land use issues or concerns that address that are confronting Dallas that come to mind. So how we're going to do it, I'm going to give a quick 30-second break just for you to kind of write and jot that down on your piece of paper. Then I'll start with, maybe you, Roy, you should start first, and I'll kind of go around the horseshoe. No eye contact. And then we'll transition to the virtual audience and kind of elaborate on those questions. So as we're going through these questions, Rick will be helping kind of provide examples of what types of concerns we want you all to provide. And then we'll do the same thing virtually. We'll transition virtually. And Devin, he's also on the call. He's able to elaborate on those as well. And Devin, feel free to jump in as well in our audience. So
Okay.
I'll give about 30 seconds just to kind of give for y'all to jot down anything. And Devin, I think you had something you wanted to comment on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if I can see the chat or not. So I'm going to just test a message to the group and we'll see if.
Oh, so the chat is going to be disabled for this particular meeting, just to avoid quorum issues. But we'll say it audibly for you to hear. All right, Roy, you ready? So we're going to basically, you're writing 5 issues that come to mind, but we're going to ask you to tell us just one at a time.
Okay.
So you give us one, and then I'll go to Brent, and then down the horseshoe. Just give us one issue. We'll transition to virtual, get their issues, and we'll come back to you again.
We just
right, to see if
throw it out. We don't need to explain.
Oh, and this is going to be part of the conversation, is to kind of make sure it's land use specific, but just drop it, bomb us. No. So go ahead. You'll be the first, and I'll document it, and you can see it on the screen, and the virtual audience can also see it as well.
So I think one thing that really came to mind was density bonuses. Dallas, in many ways, is landlocked. So we got to think about going up, especially in our prime real estate areas. So density bonuses is my first.
And you're seeing that as a issue, concern?
I think it's something that we could think through more. Yeah.
That was great. All right, Brent, you're next.
Go with affordable housing.
Affordable housing. All right.
That was also top on my list. So I'm going to go to the racial inequalities that exist.
Okay. And also excuse my any typos here. I'm going pretty fast.
You're doing great.
And you mentioned, can you elaborate on what you said, Lynette?
Racial inequalities?
Racial inequalities, and in specific to land use, is there any nuance or specificity you have with that particular?
Sure. So I think that's one of the issues that, I mean, it transcends probably everything that'll come up today, but I think about the neighborhoods, right, how they're transforming, and I think a lot of that ties back to the affordable housing piece as well.
Okay. And also, I'm going to put it on the screen just to make sure as I'm getting your thoughts. If it's off, just let me know, and we can kind of play and tweak it. All right, Dustin.
Incompatible land uses that are adjacent to each other.
Okay.
This is excellent comments. We all have planners here sitting in front of me. I like this.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Matt.
Overall understanding and accessibility of land use policies to residents.
That's a deep one.
I was hoping that I was making sure I had a good one.
Oh,
I was the first one instead of Roy.
Oh, you're. And could you help me? Could you repeat that again? Just so I can just make sure I'm typing this properly.
Overall understanding and accessibility of land use policies to residents.
Understanding and accessibility?
Yes.
Of land use policies. And what was the last piece? I'm sorry. To residents. Okay.
So Matt, would I take that it's really about the residents not having an understanding of the land use policies and some of the complexities?
Exactly. And I believe I participated in one of the community land use workshops last year. And so that was a great start, but it's just, it illuminated a lot of other issues within the community of understanding the processes within the city.
Okay, that's helpful. Actually, we're going to touch on that a bit more. So in terms of like building capacity in terms of knowledge for residents, I think that's also, was that part of that same discussion, just like knowledge understanding, or?
Building a knowledge and making sure our policies are understandable too.
Nice.
It's a two-way street.
Okay. All right, so we're going to transition to our virtual audience. Mike or Brian, you'll probably help me to go through the list because I can't see them here. And if you could kind of name the individual out, and we can go through asking them a question. I see actually the first person I see, I'm going to ask our CPC commissioners. Deborah Carpenter, would you mind providing your feedback first?
Oh, I don't mind. I would suggest that we need to take a look back at the effect of the cumulative zoning overlay that was done in the late 80s, because it was definitely not done with an equity lens, that it has had a considerably destabilizing effect on less affluent residential neighborhoods, when back at that time when incompatible adjacencies were identified, rather than downgrading adjacent industrial areas, they tended to upzone stable single-family neighborhoods. And as these areas begin to redevelop, and developers discover that single-family neighborhoods are overlaid with denser zoning, it's basically causing these neighborhoods to disappear. And so I think we really need to have a comprehensive evaluation of what was done at that time and see if some of it can be mitigated or undone.
And just to get a summary, that had a lot of really good points there. A comprehensive evaluation of
the cumulative zoning overlay that was done in the late 80s.
You said kindred zoning?
No,
cumulative. Okay.
Cumulative zoning.
Sorry, I got to clean my ears.
Yeah, that's okay.
And does it look right on the screen? Just want to make sure.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Again, feel free to let me know if it's not right. All right, Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like for us to take a look at the affordability versus market rate in terms of how the AMI is defined in underrepresented communities. It seems as if the affordable rate is akin to the affordable rate in more affluent neighborhoods is akin to the market rate in underrepresented communities. And the bonuses and things that we began to review seem to be outweighed in other communities. So I'd like for us to kind of look at, relative to the AMI, the affordability market versus the market rate.
Awesome, thank you so much. Jennifer.
My first land use issue or concern is people living, no, wait till you can type that. People living in or adjacent to zoning districts that allow for heavy industrial uses.
Y'all can see how bad I am typing, so. All right, does that look right? People living in or adjacent to zoning districts that allow for heavy industrial uses.
That's correct, thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you. Jerry, you are next.
Well, I think my first one is a historical one. There's no record of, particularly with the start of the city charter, where white residents were given free or cheap land to build on, and what quantitative cost that has developed when it comes to wealth over time. So I guess I'm looking for a racial breakdown of how land use was distributed amongst racial groups.
Okay.
And what the city has done or not done about that.
So actually, I'm going to pick on that a bit more. So in terms of kind of identifying this as an issue or a concern, are you basically saying there's a lack of a racial breakdown in terms of how people are disseminated within the city of Dallas from a land use perspective, or I guess what specifically is that exactly?
I'm saying disseminated. I'm talking about land ownership at this point. This is
land ownership.
Yeah, when it comes to land usage,
Okay.
Like how land is actually acquired or given from the city's charter from the beginning, and how that reflects today. There's no record of that.
Okay.
We're talking about land use, land use policy right now, but we have no historical record of how land use was actually started and how it was inequitable from the beginning.
Right. Okay. I want to make sure I get this thought properly documented. So I just put a few notes for me. Just historical city charter. There's a lack of historical record showing the racial breakdown of how land was given or acquired. Is there anything you want me to add to that, or make sure that I get that thought fully?
I have tons to add to it, but I don't think it could fit on that.
That was the wrong question. No, I'm joking. Okay, so we'll come back, and if there's another piece to that, we can formulate that as well. Thank you, Jerry. All right. Linda.
Good morning. I would
Good morning.
add, how are you all this morning? I would add the availability of open and recreational space throughout the city, in all areas of the city.
Open. Okay, thank you so much. Peter, you're next.
Lawrence, good morning.
Good morning, Peter. How are you doing?
Good. I'd love to see us address environmental sustainability and justice issues. These might include things like air and water quality, flooding and impervious surfaces, heat island and trees.
So you mentioned, I think you had 4: flooding, heat island, tree canopy. What was the first one you mentioned?
Air and water quality.
Okay.
And, this list obviously could go on and on.
That's all good. Thank you. That's good. All right. Did I get everybody virtually? Just want to make sure I covered everybody virtually. This first round of comments. Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just go over and look at the ones we just talked about, just to make sure that some of those were documented. So we talked about density bonuses, affordable housing, racial inequity in terms of referring to how neighborhoods are transforming and developing, incompatible land adjacencies, overall understanding of accessibility to land policies to residents and making sure that policies are understandable. Comprehensive evaluation of cumulative zoning overlay that was done in the past, and I put 1980s. That was a point in time that was mentioned. Affordable housing versus the market rates in terms of how the AMI is defined. People living in zoning districts that allow for heavy industrial uses. Within the historical piece, a lack of a historical record showing the racial breakdown of land given or acquired, availability of open and recreational space throughout the city, and environmental justice and sustainability issues. So that's the first round. What we're trying to do too, as we go through round robin, some of these might be some of your items 2, 3, 4, and 5, but just want to make sure that I kind of reiterate what those were. So with that, we'll come back to you, Roy. Had some time to think through your second one. If all of them have been touched upon, we can kind of continue with the next person, but I will start the second round with you, Roy.
Yeah, I was thinking about this whole nexus between businesses and land use. Okay. Thinking about how businesses can be regulated using land use restrictions, everything from sexually oriented businesses to payday lenders to, bars and, alcohol selling businesses. And you can even delve in deeper, which is like facade improvements and signage and of businesses to make them look nicer.
Okay. And you're saying that this is something that's not done particularly well within the city of Dallas, or something that an opportunity?
No, I mean, I was in Hilton Head, night and day between Dallas and Hilton Head. So yeah, I mean, the way they do things is,
that hurts.
It could be improved. I'll say that.
No, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, Brent, item number 2.
Yeah, I think all of mine were hit by other members of the committee, with the exception of strengthening multimodal transportation in Dallas, whether it's walkability or cycling or public transit.
So I was talking to Dustin earlier that I bike everywhere, so that's definitely a good piece to touch on.
I feel like you and I are connected here. So I know, it's all good. It's all good. One thing I don't think we've hit on is kind of the health justice, right? With, food deserts and, are we exploring that? Have we quantified it? What can be done about it?
Mm-hmm. And you're saying that the lack of kind of research in that topic, or what kind of tailored?
For me, it would be research. I don't know. Others of you might be very well versed in what that looks like in Dallas, but I'd like to see what the situation is and what how the policy reflects and helps mitigate.
Situation. Okay, thank you so much. Dustin.
So this is similar to, I think, Brent's comment on multimodal, but I would change that just slightly, or a different kind of notion is a better balance between where we live and where we work, where maybe we can lessen the need for private automobile or even transit, right? Walking, biking, things of that nature. So I think that's kind of getting at the same thing in two different policy decisions.
Okay. Is there anything on what I just typed that can be further elaborated upon? That's good. Okay. Cool. All right, Matt.
All right. I have implementing a cohesive master plan for Southern Dallas specifically. And that is more of a policy space where committees like this will, one, continue to stay relevant and be in tune with what the residents need and what the community needs, and update planning a bit more frequently than, let's say, 13 years.
Okay, thank you so much. That professor response is really, really good. All right, so we're going to switch back to our virtual audience. Deborah, Carpenter, Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes, there are land use categories in the code that need to be reevaluated and revised. Some examples would be, say, commercial motor vehicle parking right now is classified as a retail and personal service use, which is ridiculous. And, you know, these things need to be reevaluated in terms of where they can be placed, especially next to residential. Warehouses, you know, there's a great deal of difference between a fairly small inactive warehouse and a gigantic distribution facility, and the code doesn't make those distinctions. The code needs to be looked at in terms of where, I mean, we're looking at batch plants now, but where certainly heavy industrial uses can be put in terms of residential adjacency. And commercial amusement inside, there's been a proliferation of event centers, poker rooms that the code really doesn't address. And I know we see these sorts of issues regularly at CPC. So I think the basic thing is just there are land use categories in the code that need to be revised and updated, expanded.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like for us to look at to study, almost in line with what Commissioner Carpenter was saying about the comprehensive land use, but to study the existing land use relative to creating nodes of economic activity, and how to create or insert industries into the communities via land use.
And when you say inserting industries, are you talking more about just specific land uses that need to be introduced in these communities? Can you elaborate a bit on that last part?
Well, I'm speaking in reference to the ability in terms of land use for a small business or an incubator or an advanced manufacturing outfit, something that will provide jobs and also a creative technology or industry that begins to help brand various communities and provide an upside for their livelihoods. I always use the notion, what was Silicon Valley before the Silicon? And our communities are similar to that notion.
All right, so I'm going to try to see if I can summarize this properly. So we're talking more about, creating nodes of economic activity. How can land use provide opportunities for various communities to improve their quality of life? Does that kind of summarize what you mentioned? Is there more should I add to that?
No, I think that misses the mark. We are really concerned about how to create economic activity in communities based on its land use. And what I mean by economic activity is ways to invite various industries to play a role in our communities, to have businesses in our communities, and that we would have to allow by land use.
Right, okay. All right, going to make sure again. I guess you're focusing more on jobs and employment and economic activity in these communities.
Yes.
That was your focus, right? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Jennifer.
So I also echo affordable housing, but with a little bit more context to not just build affordable housing for the sake of it and without context, but really making sure that there are good opportunities for folks as they seek affordable housing. So the city is working on the mixed income housing development bonus, so I think that's great. But to this conversation, making sure there's context to where we build affordable housing.
You say make sure there's context in terms of where that gets built? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to also add that to this first piece as well.
Jennifer, would you consider would you summarize that such as like locational criteria?
Yes.
Okay. That's a very good two-word version of what I was saying.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to make this two. So, 1 second. All right. Jerry, we're back to you.
I'm really interested in the segregation of the races section in the city charter from 1907 and 1968. This section authorized the city council to pass city ordinances providing for the usage of distinct blocks for housing, amusement, and churches and schools. Very specifically, anti-Black policy said by members of the white and colored races. And in the segregation section, it defined colored races as people of African descent. And so I'm interested in how that segregation of races charter that allowed city council to pass ordinances affected the Black community very specifically, because that's how they defined it in the charter.
And when you mentioned in terms of affecting the Black community, is there anything specific?
Yeah, they're very specific about this charter. It said the usage, we're talking about land use of distinct blocks for housing, amusement, churches, and schools. So number one, that's obviously separating the land by race, but there's also an economic factor to it. There's a land use factors. That's that land use still. What are the afterlives of this land use policy?
Okay.
Particularly because it lasted for 61 years.
Right. And that's a great point you bring up, because that's actually something that as we started to do our research in terms of kind of just looking at the current state of things, I think knowing how we got to where we got to, I think that's definitely part of that discussion. So I think that's a great point to see how that has built upon where we are now. Okay. Linda.
I think the issue of all of the environmentally contaminated land, particularly in low-income neighborhoods, needs to be identified and addressed.
And could you specify where again that was located, or that you had identified?
Mostly in low-income areas, but particularly in South Dallas and West Dallas. It's a major economic impact to being able to build housing or any kind of business. Cost associated with it is significant.
Okay, Peter.
Okay, so I was thinking that if we address issues like density and walkability in the city, that it would be real important to maybe do a deep dive into mixed use development and what that might look like and how we could encourage it, and including maybe non-standard uses like pop-ups, for instance.
And kind of pick on that a little bit more to kind of focusing on the issues, concerns. Is there a lack of, you're saying, density and walkability that can be kind of looked at within mixed use developments, or can you elaborate on what you just mentioned?
Yeah, just, if we want to encourage walkability in the city, then everyone should be able to walk to, the appropriate places that they need to get food and essentials. But I think along with that, might be a conversation about non-traditional uses like pop-ups.
And either one of those, or all the way down. There's a light switch to your right. No problem.
Is that Commissioner Anderson?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Looks good, Lawrence. Thank you.
No, no worries. Okay. Okay,
Lawrence, maybe just mixed-use development to be explored.
They've explored. Okay. Okay. Does that look good, Peter?
That
To
looks
encourage
good.
density.
Maybe
Right,
with
okay.
pop-ups, we can put non-traditional, including pop-ups. There you go.
Okay.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Lawrence.
Thank you. No, thank you. All right. So we have gone through 2 rounds, both virtually and in person. I think total we have, looks like, I'm just going to guess, almost 24. Actually, 27? 28, 29? Okay. So I'm going to go through the few that we mentioned. Again, typically when we go through this, when we go through about 2 rounds, we usually cover those topics. But I just want to make sure that if there was a topic that wasn't brought up in the last 2 rounds, this will be our time to talk through that one last time. And then we're going to basically transition and start to vote on one of those top items that we feel is a priority for us. So this will be the last round. Sort of a time check. Are we good, Brian, in terms of, I think we're at 9:30? Okay, cool. All right, so this will be a last round, and just to make sure we cover any other topics that weren't brought up before. So we'll start again in person with Roy.
Just something that hasn't been brought up, which is maybe historical protections, historical overlays. In Dallas, we're very quick to bring down some of our older buildings.
Okay. And with that, well, okay, I think that's actually a good piece. Okay, awesome. Brent.
We've hit my top 5, so.
What? Nice. Okay, Lynette.
I'm covered as well, thanks.
All right, awesome.
I'm good as well.
You're good?
Covered, but I want to emphasize walkability within neighborhoods.
Okay. So I'm going to add that as another piece because I know Peter mentioned walkability and kind of talked about mixed-use developments, but walkability in just neighborhoods in general, is that kind of where you kind of, okay?
Specifically with existing neighborhoods and connecting neighborhoods.
I like that. Okay.
That way, trails, systems of that nature, city trails.
Okay.
Lawrence,
Yes.
I actually have a question I'd like to ask a couple of our members here.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a couple real good comments that talked about transit, and if you would kind of widen the view and everything. I think it was all about encouraging mass transit, yada, 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 yada. There's an extremely important element in land use planning that is all about the transit and land use relationship, or transportation land use relationship. I'd wonder if anybody would like to discuss any desire to make sure that we improve upon that and make sure we have quality transportation, transit, land use relationships.
Yes.
Good. Just wanted to get that recorded. Thanks. Not from me, from you all.
Yeah, I think there were a few. I think that's a great point that you kind of brought up, Rick. We talked about transit, and we talked about connectivity, walkability. But I think those pieces together, how you phrase it, that's a specific kind of relationship between transportation and land use. I think those are basically one and the same in terms of how we see land use. Those are tied in pretty closely because you have to go and connect to particular different land uses. So that's a good point.
This is Dustin. Can I expand on that just a minute? Because I do think there's a nuance that's important here. Transit is highly important, but I think as we're also looking comprehensively at the entire city, we also have to look at our roadway network. So the city controls an inordinate amount of right-of-way that's chewed up by roads that are very important. So while we should and we must focus on transit and moving people through alternative forms in increasing that mobility, we must also evaluate our land use policies as it relates to the roadway network that the city controls and owns today. So I just wanted that kind of on the record as we go down this path.
That's a great nuance. Thank you.
And Rick, another issue that I think in Dallas we've seen is with regard to transit-oriented development is the disparities between the north side and the south side. The densities, the development seen on the north side compared to the south side, polar opposite of each other. Just understanding why that is, I think would be critical to this conversation as it relates to transit-oriented development and why it hasn't developed in the same way, which is really a head scratcher to me.
Excellent comment. Really appreciate that.
And I think with you, Roy, with what you just said, it kind of goes to a lot of what Jerry was saying, actually, with that historical, understanding that historical means of how we got to where we were. I think you kind of focused on a particular point of that, but I think that historical element is very critical. So you did have
there's one thing that we didn't talk about on here, and that's the natural resource that flows through Dallas, which is the Trinity River.
Right.
Or we call it Arca-Coastal River because that's the cattle name of it. But land usage near or by the Trinity River, particularly when we talk about pathways, a city plan for Trinity Park usage. We know that Trinity Park Conservancy is building a park there, but is there a city plan for the usage of land near the park? And obviously, there's the historical implications with Black people and people of color being very intentionally placed for land usage right next to the river, particularly when it didn't have flood protection. So I'm interested in, what is the land usage plan by the Trinity River, our main one of our main natural resources. Very jealous of Fort Worth and their land usage by the river. So.
And in terms of, I was trying to pick more about what you said too. So what is the plan for the land usage in terms of, I think there's another thought behind there. I just want to kind of pick your brain. What issue are you seeing that could come from not knowing what that plan is?
Well, one, is there a city plan for land usage by the river? Does that exist? I'm not even aware of that. We know what historical land usage has been, particularly when we talk about communities like the Bottom, West Dallas has been flooding, South Dallas, right, that has been used for illegal dumping. So what is the city land usage plan for the Trinity River? Two, what are the historical implications of the Trinity River when it comes to some of the projects that are happening, like Trinity Park Conservancy's Harold Simmons Park, right? The largest, money donation to the city to date, $50 million. And some of those other projects, like the Army Corps of Engineers, were doing a big project. So I think that's a real important thing that we don't talk about, particularly when we are still in a floodplain. The city of Dallas is still a floodplain.
Not a good point. Okay. Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Jerry, just FYI, there is a comprehensive study on the Trinity corridor for land use and transportation. I'm not exactly sure how valid it is today. It was done, I think, right around 2007, I think.
Thank you.
All right.
Chair, if we can get
go ahead, Jerry.
Chair, if we can get a copy of that, that would be great. I would love to see that. I haven't seen that.
Okay, and we can provide that to committee members after this. Thank you. All right. So we have, I believe, 4 more virtually, or 5 more virtually. Commissioner Anderson has your hand raised, so we'll kind of switch order for a bit. Commissioner Anderson, did you have a comment on that last piece, or did you have something?
I did have a comment, but I didn't want to usurp anyone's time. I know Commissioner Carpenter was positioned before me. I didn't mean to jump out ahead, but I guess I will go ahead and ask. I'd like for us to explore the potential of mixed-use designations at public parks in order to begin to explore live, work, learn, play opportunities. Since our area is particularly, I guess, all over Dallas, we have an abundance of parks and open spaces. We've got an open space land use policy, and all of that is some to the benefit and some to the detriment of the communities. So if we could look at how we could create highest and best use scenarios at public parks, and also in terms of our natural resources, I came up around 5 Mile Creek, and in looking at it, bifurcating our communities, it would be an interesting play to create some economic activity around 5 Mile Creek master plan.
And I heard a few things, so I'm just going to touch on those real quick. You mentioned mixed-use development, and you also mentioned public parks. Were those 2 topics related, or are you thinking about those are 2 different items? I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, those are squarely related. Mixed-use development using parkland.
Okay. And this is a lack of mixed-use development using parkland. That's what I want to tailor this to be a concern or issue that you see.
Well, I'd like for us to explore how we might be able to create mixed-use development opportunities. So there's not a detriment currently. We cannot use any mixed-use designations by right at any of the parks. And if we were to look at putting housing, for instance, or locating any industry partners or even grocery stores, we don't have that right to do at any park. And I think that's a missed opportunity.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you so much. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes, I'd like to see us address missing middle housing. You know, the city has an abundance of single family zoning, and it has, you know, denser multifamily, but we don't have, you know, we haven't looked systematically at, you know, duplexes, ADUs, triplexes. You know, we have clustered housing on the books, but it's almost never used. It'd be interesting to find out, you know, what it would take to get, you know, slightly denser single family type zoning, you know, where I think it would be helpful to add some thoughtful density into areas rather than just having strictly single family and strictly multifamily. So missing middle housing, I guess, is how you.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure that you all can actually see my screen because I'm starting to have some network issues. I know you all can hear me, but I'm not sure if y'all can see my screen. Okay, on my end looks good. Just want to make sure virtually, can everybody see? Sticky note, lack of middle housing. Just want to make sure that's on the screen. Right, okay.
Well, I guess it would be lack of middle housing or missing middle housing, but not lack of missing.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we're almost done with this. I'm sorry, and it's just make sure this was what you wanted to see, Commissioner Carpenter, lack of missing middle housing?
Well, I mean, that's sort of contradictory. I think missing middle housing would sum it up, or lack
Missing.
of middle.
Gotcha.
Just missing
Sorry.
middle.
Yeah, I just added a slash there, Lawrence. I think it's
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate
Lack
it.
of or missing middle housing, whatever.
it's lack of slash missing middle housing. Yeah.
Okay. Just take control. Perfect. So I will add 2 more notes, sticky notes for Jennifer. Oh, actually 3 more: Jennifer, Linda, and Peter. And just a time check too. We have 50 minutes left on. Well, I guess 50 minutes left on this workshop. So after these next few issues, we're going to start voting on those main items, and then we'll go into our last 2 questions. So we're trying to have this particular segment done around 10:30 and wrap that up, but I just want to give a time check for everybody that's participating. So next would be Jennifer.
Okay, so my last one that I have is historically disinvested areas experiencing levels of displacement versus benefiting from influx of capital.
Is it influx?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. All right. Thank you for actually saying that slow. That was very helpful. All right. Linda, if you can hear us, you are next.
Thank you. I think one thing that hasn't been emphasized enough is parking requirements.
Okay. And just kind of elaborate on that. How do you see that as an issue? Is there lack of parking requirements? Is there too much? We kind of know, but I just want to have you kind of mention what issue do you see with that?
The requirements of parking for a building type or a building use are very, it takes up a lot of space. It's also very expensive. It limits affordability for the development of a housing unit when you have so much parking required, particularly for multifamily and commercial businesses.
Okay. And then when you mention being costly, and that's more for the developers, that's more for the community. What are your thoughts on that being costly?
It adds cost to the development. So in a multifamily scenario, if you're having to build so many parking spaces per unit or per building unit type, that is cost associated with reducing the cost for the development overall, which also limits the ability for it to be more affordable. We did an analysis of the cost of parking. It's ridiculous. So not only, how many parking lots do we have downtown Dallas that are taking up space that could be used for development, as well as parking requirements for building types?
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And I think, Peter, if you're still on, you'll be the last one for this round, and then we'll go into kind of selecting our top 3.
All right, Lawrence. So this one's about maintaining and restoring natural areas. And I want to specifically mention preserving and enhancing tree coverage in the city. And Lawrence, the only thing I would add there is not just preserving, but also enhancing.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Maintaining and restoring natural areas, preserving and enhancing tree coverage in the city. All right. So we have a lot of really great issues, topics, areas of concern that we all just mentioned. Again, in addition to this workshop, there's going to be other opportunities to provide feedback. So if others pop up, or we have a few more months to kind of gather that initial feedback from you all in the community. So don't let this be limiting in terms of time. We're always going to get more feedback. So what we want to do now, I'm going to read through, actually there's a bunch of these. We're going to read through all of these and kind of have you all vote in terms of those that you feel are your top 3 issues. So I was saying this pretty quickly, and I'm going to go through the horseshoe first, and then going to go virtually, just to see if these are issues that are identified from you all. So the way I want to do it, it'll be easier here on in person. I'm just going to read through them. If this is one of your top issues, just raise your hand, and I'll put those numbers of stars on the sticky note. And then virtually, is there a hand raise function? Do y'all have the ability to do that? I just want to make sure that that's available for you all.
Can you see us if we raise our hand?
If you go ahead and raise your hand, I just want to test real quick. Either Brian or okay, yeah. So just virtually raise your hand. That's perfect. So let's just do that, and then that way I'll just tabulate and count those as well. So I'll do in person, virtual. Go to the next question, back and forth, and just kind of selecting your top 3 issues. So as we were talking, just kind of in the back of your head, I know you had a piece of paper or a phone. There are some that kind of were new for the first time. I want you to select 3 using the honor system. Please don't select more than 3, and we'll jot that down. Okay, so the first one we talked about, density bonuses. So the city is landlocked. Some things that can be thought through more. So if that's an issue or one of your top issues, you can raise your hand virtually and in person, and then we'll put a number of stars on that one. And again, just because there isn't any votes on it doesn't mean it's not an issue. We're collecting all of these. We just want to identify those top items for the group. Okay, so in person, no hands raised. Virtually, I don't see any hands raised. Okay. Affordable housing. So there were two buckets. There was one more general affordable housing, and there was affordable housing that was focused on locational criteria. So I think we can, what I'm going to do is actually make this into one.
Hey, Lawrence, do you maybe want to, I don't know if everyone's had a chance to see the full list for long. Do you maybe want to give everyone a minute or so to?
Okay, I'm so sorry. I was kind of blasting through this. So we do have a lot on here, so I can talk through it really quickly and then give a few minutes just to kind of cull through what those were, and then we'll come back and kind of do the voting, okay? So my apologies. Thank you, Brian.
Feel free to use your worksheet or your paper to write down your 3 if that's helpful.
I appreciate it. So I'm going to run through these pretty quickly, and
it might be good to number those so that we can identify them readily. It might be good to number those so that we can identify them readily.
Number them, okay.
I mean, it may be a bad idea, but I'm just thinking somehow so we can reference back to that particular tab.
Got it. So actually what we're going to do, since we're all looking at this screen at the same time, I guess we could number them, but what basically I'm going to run through all this, and then if, as you hear these out loud, if they make sense as your top issue, just write that down in your piece of paper, and then we'll kind of vote when we come back at the second round. Okay, so affordable housing, locational criteria, racial inequity, and I see what you're saying. Let me go back. So I think that makes sense, what you just said. So let me find a way of doing that. All right. 1, density bonuses. 2, affordable housing, locational criteria. 3, racial inequity, referring to how neighborhoods are transforming and developing.
Lawrence, this is Dustin. One thought here, because there's so many sticky notes on the numbering system, is I think we were just chatting kind of offline.
Right.
A lot of these are the same theme.
Right. Okay.
I think we're hitting at mobility in 3 or 4 different sticky notes. We're hitting at, affordable housing, even missing middle housing could be classified as kind of workforce or affordable.
Right.
I'm wondering from a flow perspective, it may be easier for us to kind of rank our top 3 themes that are coming out of this instead of focusing on an individual sticky. Just one thought, since we're a mix of hybrid or in-person and virtual.
Okay, I actually like that. So just to elaborate and repeat what Dustin just mentioned, since we have a bunch of stickies on this particular platform, his suggestion was to identify what those top themes are, and then we kind of select and vote on what those top themes are. So a few that we just quickly mentioned was connectivity and mobility, affordable housing. So we can maybe start to kind of write down those particular topics. Just want to provide that suggestion, O'Brien.
So one quick thought. So we had the same comment come up in our public workshop. Somebody keep in mind on the back end when we sort of code and analyze this, we will collapse, like if a vote for affordable housing is spread amongst 3 different sticky notes that are similar, we will collapse those on the back end. So I would recommend folks not to worry about what it looks like on the screen right now. We will absolutely capture the spirit of what's being said in the back end as we tally this. So just keep that in mind if it's helpful for the process.
And another idea too, I'm not sure if you all on the virtually can see all the sticky notes at once and even read them. Again, I'm not sure if that, just want to look through that. If it's too small, I can read through them too as well. So I'll go ahead and continue reading through them. Is that okay? Just to make sure everybody who can't see it knows what we have up here.
Is anyone on the committee unable to read it from your screen? I know in person I have a decent view, but that works right there.
Right, is this perfect? Can you all see? Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this on the screen, and I'll just go ahead and normalize just for myself, and give a few minutes just to see what your top 3 are, and then after that we will kind of tally those up. We have 1 more minute. All right. So we will start voting on the items that are on the screen. Again, if we're not able to provide your comments today, our staff is available basically all the time to kind of get that feedback from you all. So the first one we're going to vote on, and again, I'm going to need assistance from Brian and those virtually to see if I miss any hands raised, but those in person and virtual, just physically raise your hand. Density bonuses, the city landlocked, some things that can be thought through more. If that was one of your top issues, can you raise your hand? Okay. Next, affordable housing, and I added as well locational criteria. So affordable housing and thinking about locational criteria with that. So in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Virtually 1, 2, 3, 4. So total 9. Let's see. All right. Racial inequity, referring to how neighborhoods are transforming and developing. So in person, no hands raised. Oh, go ahead. Oh, Matt has one hand raised. Okay, perfect. Oh, 2. Okay, so I was like,
Exactly.
What was that?
Quick question. So, aligning with that, I see maybe 3 or 4, maybe 2 or 3 different note tabs. So I'm also trying to jot down those numbers so I can associate with that number too.
Yeah, because I would consider South Dallas part of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where, in essence, it gets into a discussion of what your top 3 themes are of which of these issues concern you.
And again, internally staff, we're going to put these into themes and buckets, similar to that slide that we showed with the word cloud. Those general themes that'll also be done with this conversation, but we also want to make sure we get some of that specificity from this audience as well. Incompatible land use adjacencies. So in person, 1, 2. Virtually, Commissioner Carpenter, 3. And 4 with Linda. Okay. All right. Overall understanding of accessibility of land use policies to residents, making sure policies are understandable. 1 in-house, 2 virtually. Oh, 2 in-house. Okay. So 3 total. And just remember, everybody gets 3 votes total.
Honor system.
Right, please. All right. Number 6, maintaining and restoring natural areas, preserving and enhancing tree coverage in the city. Okay. 0 in person, and I don't see any virtually. Lack of historical overlays / protections. Okay. None. Oh, there we go. 1 personally. Is there any virtually? All right. Mixed use development opportunities using parkland. There's a lack of creating mixed use development by right in parks. Okay, virtually 1. Okay. All right. Comprehensive evaluation of cumulative zoning overlay that was done in the past. That being one of your top 3. All right, none person, virtually, none there. Affordability versus market rate in terms of how the AMI is defined. The affordable rate is akin to the market rate. Is that a top 3? Okay, virtually, we have 1. In person, none. All right. People living in or adjacent to zoning districts that allow for heavy industrial uses. So virtually, we have 1, 2. In person, none.
Excuse me, wouldn't that be more or less I mean, I would consider that important, but definitely important, but I cast my vote for incompatible land use adjacencies that, included that. So I'm not sure how you're counting.
Deborah, but my question for that is, the city doesn't think of it as incompatible because it's happening right now. So I think it needs more, I guess, clarity.
I understand that. To me, I mean, it's completely and totally incompatible. But yes, I see your point. Thank you.
And to what you're saying, Commissioner Carpenter, you're thinking that incompatible land uses and this question here, you saw this as being synonymous? Kind of, Jennifer, I know you want to elaborate on
adjacencies. I was looking at as heavily as being residents being put next to industrial uses.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, we often see a lot of overlap, and I think when the plan gets developed, themes emerge, and so 11 and 4 to me are very similar. And but what's important, I mean, I would think just keep voting, and as we get all the input from everyone.
I just wanted to clarify that I did think that was extremely important, but my vote had already been cast on a very similar thing. So
got you. Okay,
that's my point.
Makes sense. Awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Carpenter. Historically, looking at the city charter, there's a lack of historical records showing the racial breakdown of how land was given or required. Okay, one virtually, none in person. And just thank you all for your patience and your feedback as we kind of add these numbers. Don't fall asleep on me, please. So 13, availability of open and recreational space in and throughout the city. Okay, in person, none. Virtually, I see none. Okay. Land use policies that relate to roadway network. The City of Dallas owns a lot of right-of-way. Okay, none in person, none virtually. All right. Transit-oriented development, TOD. There are disparities between North and South Dallas. Understanding why things haven't developed in the same manner. At that. So virtually. Jerry, your video is off. I'm not sure if you were wanting to show your video. If your hand is a rose raised, so make sure. Okay.
Lawrence,
my
can
video
I hop in real quick and note on? Oh, sorry, Mr. Hawkins.
No, he mentioned me. I was just telling him my video went in and out. So.
Okay.
Great. And can we note for the record that Commissioner Anderson left the meeting at 10:02 a.m.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, keep going. Missing middle housing. So in person, no hands raised. Virtually, no hands raised. All right. 17, environmental sustainability and justice issues. Flooding, heat island, tree canopy, air and water quality, to name a few. In person, I think is that hand raised, Roy? Oh, no, okay. Virtually, we have 1, 2. Okay, so 2 total. Okay.
If I could add again, I would consider environmental justice to be sort of an overarching theme that would cover a whole lot of things. Walkability, pollution, open space, trees, economic opportunity. So to me,
No, thank you so much. All right, number 18, nexus between business and land uses. How can businesses be regulated based on land uses? So 1 in person. All right, thank you. Strengthening multimodal transportation. 1 virtually. 1 in person, 2 in person, so we have 3 total. Number 20, health justice, food deserts. There's a lack of research. Get a better understanding of how the situation, I guess, has unfolded and how policy reflects this issue. Oh, sorry, I can zoom in. So virtually and in person, no hands raised. All right, number 21, mobility. Talking about the better balance between where we live and where we work. So in person and virtually, no hands. Number 22, implementing a cohesive master plan for Southern Dallas, updating planning a bit more frequently. All right, no hands raised on this one. Land usage by the Trinity River. What is the city's plan for the land use here? Trying to understand what that is. All right, no hands as well. 24, historically, disinvested areas experiencing levels of displacement versus benefiting from influx of capital. So let me check virtually. One virtually, okay. All right, last row, land use categories in a code that needs to be reclassified, recoded, and located. I'm talking about locational criteria with that. So in person and virtually, no hands raised. Okay. Creating nodes of economic activity. How can land use provide economic activity for various communities? And we're talking about jobs, employment, et cetera, for certain communities in the city of Dallas. Virtually and in person. I see no hands raised. Oops, I'm not sure I copied this twice. Segregation of races in the city charter. Trying to understand how did this affect the Black community. There is an economic effect as well in terms of understanding that. So that is an issue, one virtually and none in person. Nope. All right, environmentally contaminated land in low economic areas. There's a cost associated that is significant. No hands raised from my end. Actually, my screen is disconnected again, just to make sure. Brian, is there any hands raised virtually?
No.
Okay.
No.
Cool. All right. Three more. To encourage density and walkability, mixed-use development to be explored, non-traditional. Look at non-traditional ideas such as pop-ups. So I'm going to check out virtually. I can't see any hands raised. So if you could check for me, Brian. In person, no hands raised on that one. And two more. Oh, what was that?
No one virtually.
Okay, cool. Improving walkability in existing neighborhoods. What did I say here? I think with trails and other connections. Okay, no hands here. No hands virtually. And last one, parking requirements takes up a lot of development space. It's also costly to the development, limits the ability for development to be more affordable. So in person, no hands raised. Virtually, all right.
We had one virtually.
Is he virtually?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to zoom back out. Just as a quick glance, affordable housing, overwhelmingly the kind of top issue that we selected with 9 votes. Behind that, incompatible land use adjacencies. And then the third top one was overall understanding and accessibility of land use policies to residents and making sure policies are understandable. So again, there are a few others that have 2 in here, but these are really great composition of comments and issues. So what we're going to do now is transition to the third part of this is now identifying which projects or actions can be undertaken in Dallas to address all of these concerns and issues that we just developed. So I know from basically, if you had all the money, you're a policymaker, what would you decide or develop or think through? How can we address some of these issues that we've identified? Not just the ones that we, put a star by, but there could be some issues that can be addressed by, one action that touches on a lot of them. So now kind of take maybe a 1 minute just to think through what these actions could be, maybe your top action to address either a few of these or one particular important item that we addressed here. So I'm going to put this back on the screen just as a reference. I want you to think through what's one project, what's one major initiative that you would employ to address some of these that we just showed here. Again, to focus on one at this juncture, and then we'll have more opportunities later parts of this project to get more feedback on others as well. All right. So we'll start with you, Roy. If you were the mayor of the city, what's one thing you would employ to address some of the issues that we just identified above?
Well, one of the things that was brought up was obviously affordable housing, but that is such a huge comprehensive topic. So we would have to hone in on kind of studying those specific land use issues like density bonuses, like the use of inclusionary zoning, even though it's kind of outlawed by state legislature right now, but that's another topic. Developer incentives, thinking about land use restrictions within single family and multifamily properties. We got to study the issue a little bit more, and that would be my suggestion, because this is an all-encompassing issue,
Right.
and the limitations of what this group can do are not infinite.
Right. So kind of researching, kind of studying, we focused on like land use specific issues, but I think you mentioned like land use ties to other pieces and kind of doing that background research,
Right.
i.e. inclusionary zoning, land use bonuses, developer incentives, all that kind of understand like kind of what's tied in, what kind of affects land use. Is that kind of what you're kind of tying into, is like doing that research, but what's your end goal?
What's our end goal there?
Right.
How can be if there's policy changes needed?
Okay.
What are those incentives that can be brought to the table that are not at the table now?
Okay. Awesome. And also, to just an FYI, so this platform for the committee members, it will be made available for you all to review after this. So don't feel like you need to quickly take all the notes. We'll provide that to you all after this. And there will be a comment section, a note section to provide more feedback or clarity if we didn't have that on the section here. So thank you so much. So Brent, if you could provide one action, I know we have 3, but if you had provide one action or project that you would undertake to fix all the problems that you just identified, what would that one be?
Fix all the problems with one action. First off, I want to sure we comply with TOMA if there is an online comment section. So let's just be sure we've definitely looked at that thoroughly. I think would be a very close look at our zoning ordinance and how it could possibly be adjusted in a way to allow the development of additional housing, including incorporating additional density while at the same time, remaining sensitive to existing stable neighborhoods.
That's too small, sorry. So for you, just kind of summarize, so looking at the zoning ordinance, but more so, as we're looking at it, are you looking at like rewriting? Are you looking at just analyzing? What part of looking at the zoning ordinance would you be employing or suggesting to get?
I think eventually there could potentially be code amendments or authorized hearings to rezone particular areas.
All right. All right, Lynette.
Thank you. I think similar to the housing, the inequalities and the racial inequalities we listed, certainly I think we should study that and come up with a list of what are the opportunities or the divides where we actually have an opportunity to have policy or something to affect that. And then for that one and all of them, what are the measures of success? Right. So how do we know we've made progress? What's the from and to look like? What are the KPIs that would then be associated?
All right. So help me kind of tweak this too. So studying racial and you mentioned inequalities. Just want to make sure. Do you say inequalities? Do you say inequities? I want to make sure.
Inequalities.
Inequalities. And then looking at, or what are the measures of success to know that we made progress in that area? Is there anything that should be adding?
Right. I would just add where are the opportunities for us as a committee to influence? So not just understanding what they are, but what actions can we take?
I say that to my wife all the time, actionable items. And she's like, no, I don't, I hate that word. So it kind of makes us kind of move forward. So I do appreciate that. All right, Dustin, what is a project or action you would undertake or like to see done to address the issues that we just identified?
I think it would be very helpful to define and then educate what can land use policy change and what can't it change, right? And I think as I looked through all those many stickies we did in the first round of questioning, there's a lot to solve.
Right.
And I would argue land use is not the only tool in that toolbox to solve a lot of what we've discussed this morning. And so I think, it's very important to have these conversations about what can we do with land use, what are we unable to do, and what other areas might we look at through this process to help get to positive outcomes and goals associated with this project and the future of our city.
Okay, perfect. Excuse me. So defining and educating what can land use policies do and not do. Land use is not the only tool to solve the issues that we've identified. What other tools can we use and implement to addressing these issues?
Good summary.
Okay, thank you. Matt.
Just whispered that he stole all of my thunder, but I want to add on the education and awareness piece. I think that one, the policy I would do is create a trust campaign. There's a lack of trust of the structure of processes and policies, and so based on the multiple subjects that we've discussed, three themes of eco-dev, racial inequality, and education of residents needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And there needs to be an explicit campaign internally to re-engage with all parties associated.
And those three that you mentioned, could you mention those again? You just mentioned kind of three.
The three main themes, as I was feverishly writing numbers and trying to create columns for them: economic development policies, racial inequities or inequalities historically, and education.
And what was that? The second one? Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Racial inequalities
Racial
and inequities.
Okay. Great. All right. Thank you so much. Virtually, Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes, I'd say the city needs to do a land use survey of industrial and residential adjacencies and see where these inappropriate juxtapositions can be relatively easily redressed through rezoning or establish new criteria for distances between residents and specific industries.
I can spell.
And it's not going to be possible just to rely on permits and certificates of occupancy because a lot of these land uses don't have correct permits, have no COs, have inappropriate COs. So it's going to be a need to get on the ground and see what's actually there.
Right. And in terms of establishing that criteria that the city can use, in terms of identifying what is quote unquote too close or too far, I guess.
Yeah, what's
that
an
criteria.
appropriate distance? Yeah, I mean, basically the city's going to have to just establish a policy for industrial uses. Where do they want them to be, and how close can residents be? You know, they created a problem and they co-located poor residents and industry, and then what happened is the industrial uses basically trumped the residents. So we created this situation, so we're going to have to establish a means to extricate ourselves from it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I think I see Jennifer on the screen. If you can go next. And I can't hear you. Any issues on the back end? So we'll come back to you, Jennifer, just to make sure there's no issues on our back end. Jerry.
Yeah, so my thoughts are about Jennifer's topic, which I think is a project or action we can take immediately, particularly because there's been so much national attention and embarrassment about this. I was actually part of a documentary about environmental racism in Dallas. And I think that is remunerating the residential and industry land around floral farms and, creating an environmental buffer and a land use plan around that area, particularly because of the history of that area and what happened with, a deep wood dump, which cost the city also a lot of money and embarrassment to create the Trinity the Trinity Audubon Center, which is really a reparations ordinance, a private-public partnership that the city had to create a natural oasis, which is really a landfill that lets out methane gas every day, right? I think that there can be a project that stops that before it turns into something else. I don't know what else to
the
say
floor
about that.
farms, the Trinity River, is that like you were talking about another project to, can you elaborate on that one?
I think, remunerating the area that has been used for industry right there where residents are living and surrounded by industry, very specifically, because that's still happening. And I also think those residents have been on this conversation in this meeting with us every meeting we've had. So I want to speak to the residents who have been present. Their issue has been front and foremost.
Okay.
And we're still polluting in their backyard. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Jennifer, it looks like you're back with us. Can Could you go ahead and speak? Just make sure you're good.
Yes, sorry. I'm using my phone now. So sorry.
No worries.
So I kind of disconnected when we just started. Can you repeat the question to make sure I answer it correctly, please?
No problem. So we're identifying one major project or action that you'd use to address the issues that we identified in the beginning. So the action could be related to one of these particular issues or one that you can, maybe touch on multiple items on here. So we're trying to think through a project or action that you would, if you were the mayor of City of Dallas or had power to kind of develop a project or action, what's something that you would develop to address some of the issues that we identified?
Okay, thank you. So I would enforce a racial equity analysis in various processes in the city of Dallas. So, for example, a racial equity analysis to be done on how major actions as it relates to land use and planning will have an effect on communities. So that's internally, right? So if a policy is being proposed, then what is the collateral effect, unintended consequences as sometimes it's used? And then externally, for rezoning requests, there's always a staff analysis. So embedding a racial equity analysis to a proposed rezoning, similar, you could think about it, it's the same parallel of an environmental impact assessment that's done, but instead you're doing a racial equity impact analysis as well. That way commissioners are able to have that additional data as well. And so yeah, I would enforce that internally and externally at City Hall. And that is something that's already being done in the field of urban planning. Dr. Lance Freeman, I believe from the University of Pennsylvania, he's the one that's been doing a lot of this work across the country. So that's what I would do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so enforcing a racial equity analysis in various processes throughout the city of Dallas, and basically try to address how certain land uses affect certain communities, embedding this into our current rezoning analysis, and having this be enforced internally and externally. Oops. So make sure I got that right.
Yeah, so also policies overall. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. We have, I think, two more. Linda, and then Peter, you be our last participant to provide your feedback. So, Linda.
Since I don't really have any original thoughts here, I'm going to tag on to several other people. I think the combination of what Dustin said about education on land use is really, really important. But I also think what Matt said about, doing something that would engender trust, because there is an awful lot of distrust in our communities as to what the city is doing, and whether or not our committee is diverse enough that would create that trust level, probably not. So I think the education on land use and the combination of figuring out a process for creating trust would be very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Peter.
Hey, Lawrence, quick question. Are you going to go back around for a second input on this particular item or just one?
Just one for today, but this would be shared with the those in person. Like, no. Okay. But this would be shared with the rest of the committee members, and then there'll be more opportunity to provide feedback on these items. But for today, we're just doing one go around.
Okay, good. Then I'm going to do a high level one here, which would be an explicit commitment to embed equity and inclusion into all processes.
Okay. And, explicit commitment to embed equity and inclusion within all processes. Was that?
Yeah, maybe in parentheses we could put such as translated bilingual info.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear that. That piece.
bilingual or translated information.
Okay, got you. All right.
Lawrence, can I just add maybe one thing to Dustin's and a couple of people piggyback in terms of the education that we include students to? Multi-generational. Dustin, I hope you don't mind.
Not at all, Peter, only because it's you.
All right. So time check, it is 10:30. We have one other piece, and I'll probably have this be done probably when I do send this out to you all, and then we'll make sure that there's no quorum issues. But the last question, we always want to end on a high note in terms of thinking through these workshops. So we've talked through a lot of concerns, a lot of issues, a lot of ways of addressing and fixing those issues. But the last question that we just wanted to pose is, what are the primary strengths and assets of the City of Dallas? And if you could do that in one word or two words, we'll give you two. What's a primary strength and asset that you say that's emblematic of Dallas? So I'll kind of have you all kind of just raise your hands, and we'll kind of just ask you all in person and virtually, and then that'll basically end this workshop. And then with that, I'll kind of talk about next steps and how we go about, kind of getting this information, putting it with our existing information that we're doing with the community, and how we'll disseminate this information to you all in the next few weeks. So just thinking through, I'll ask those in person. What's a primary strength or asset in the City of Dallas? I'll just kind of go with you, Roy, if you could say that in one or two words.
Can-do spirit.
Okay.
Of Dallas residents.
Can-do spirit. Okay. Oops. All right. Brent.
I think the resources are there if we want to deploy them in the right way.
Okay. That was more than two words. Mess with you.
If we want to deploy them in the right way.
Ouch.
Lynette.
2 words. We'll go with integrity commitment.
Okay.
Did you like that instead of commitment to integrity? I got it. 2 words.
Okay. Dustin.
Strong neighborhoods.
Nice. All right, Matt.
Grit. One word.
Put it all in caps. There we go. Grit.
There you go.
All right, perfect. So we'll switch virtually. Commissioner Carpenter.
Diverse economy.
Diverse economy.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Jennifer.
The people.
Good people.
No.
The people.
Oh, okay. Nice. Okay. The people. You could have used one word, people. No, I'm joking. No, the people. Awesome. Thank you so much. Jerry.
3 words. 4th most diverse city in the country.
Say that again.
4th most diverse city in the country.
We're the most diverse city in the country?
4th.
4th most diverse city. I'll add more. All right. Linda.
Growth potential.
Growth potential. All right. And Peter.
Diverse people.
Diverse people. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to do a quick canvassing of what we've done so far. Identified a ton of issues and concerns. Thank you all for your patience doing that. Then we got into developing and thinking through which projects or initiative actions we would undertake to address some of those issues that we had identified. Again, this will be made available to you all, so no need to fret. And then just identifying what those strengths and assets are, City of Dallas. The can-do spirit, resources are there and they're deployed in the right way. Integrity, commitment, strong neighborhoods, grit, diverse economy, the people, the fourth most diverse city in the country. I need to pick your brain, Jerry, in terms of what leads to diversity. That's a good piece to have. Growth potential and diverse people. So awesome. Thank you all so much for that. I just want to also make a plug too with a lot of the feedback that we got today, available online. We do have availability to provide feedback in more nuanced locations, depending on where you live, where you work, with our social pinpoint online mapping tool. I'll be sending that link in this presentation. Just FYI, if you didn't get your comments here, there's a lot of opportunities to provide that within what we're doing with the City of Dallas. So I'm going to jump through the last part of our presentation today. So the next steps for this committee. So again, there's a lot of online tools and surveys that we have at the City of Dallas and Planning and Urban Design has. If you could help us promote what those tools are within your sphere, where you work, where you live, that just continue to help what we're doing, not just here, but just throughout the cities and your spheres of influence. That's one thing that we ask for this committee to do for wherever you are. Existing conditions report is being developed from staff and our consultant. That will be the next thing for you all to review when we meet for Dallas. So just an FYI, there will be an existing conditions report that we'll be sending your way to review and just kind of get a quick snapshot of what we're looking at from a land use perspective at the City of Dallas. The following meeting will be our engagement summary review. So I think when we first had our first workshop, we could give you a quick snapshot of what we were doing so far. But this review will be a little bit more. It will be more comprehensive, giving you a better picture of where we've done our engagement, the metrics that we've used, the holes that we saw, and how we address those. And what we're trying to do internally is make sure that the canvassing that we're doing matches with the demographic of the city. So we'll go through all of that in detail. We'll provide a report for you beforehand just to be able to review and provide feedback in terms of how we can improve in terms of our engagement. And the next steps after this particular engagement, period in time, we're going to be developing and going through our place types. So in terms of thinking through how land uses are developed, we're starting to think through how place types and places are thought through in the City of Dallas, and you will be using your input to help develop what that looks like as we go into community and develop those place types. And then from that feedback from from this committee and the community will kind of lead into a visioning workshop similar to this, where we delve more into place type analysis and thinking through how that can be done with the For Dallas initiative. And then for our department, Planning and Urban Design, PUD, we will continue to use our online tools, pop-up events, in-person events, capacity building, and other partnerships to promote and get feedback from the community related to land use and what we're trying to gather from initial feedback from the community related to land use. When we get all that information together, again, we'll be developing that engagement summary report that shows where we've canvassed, what we've asked, how we've done it, and giving you a quick overview in terms of just where we are and where we need to go forward with this For Dallas approach. In tandem, our consultant is helping us develop a baseline scenario model, which is a way of basically using our existing conditions data, basically model and show that with numbers and metrics to see what we're looking at from a existing conditions standpoint. So it's a more technical approach in addition to the existing conditions report that we'll be using to build upon when we go through the visioning and ultimately when we go through developing scenarios for land use. And then the community visioning, like we mentioned before, will be part of that in terms of developing how that's going to look like for the community. You all will be helping to help us craft what that should look like and using your input to figure out the way of moving forward with information that we've gotten from the engagement summary, existing conditions report, the modeling, and how that should play out into our community visioning, where we go into place types. And this last thing, stay involved. Again, we'll be sharing this again. You can contact us through our website. Be notified through our stay informed text. We have the survey online, interactive map online. You can follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can reach out to us through email. And also, y'all have my phone number and my email address. Share this with everybody that you get in contact with. This is a QR code. You'll be able to snap it on your screen, and it should take you exactly to where you need to be. So with that is all I have. Thank you all so much for your patience and not falling asleep on me. It was a pleasure, and we hope to see y'all again.
Thank you so much, Mr. Agu, for your great facilitation of the workshop. We have a couple more agenda items left before we adjourn. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our March 8th meeting?
Chair Rubin, I have some amendments.
Oh, okay.
I recused myself on item 2.2, draft neighborhood planning update, but that's not on there, so I don't know if that should be or not.
The minutes should reflect that, so let's amend the minutes too.
And the other thing too, which I don't know if the minutes should have, but for the approval of the last meeting minutes, I wasn't there because my computer just shut down on me. So just those two amendments, in case we add who voted yes or no, my name shouldn't be on there.
Okay, great, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second. Seconded by Commissioner Carpenter. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. The motion carries. All right, finally, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Bullard.
Before we second, I want to make a quick comment.
Oh, sure.
Sorry. One, thank you. I want to thank you for this workshop. I do want to state this hour and a half or so of us developing ways of implementing strategies to better Dallas is a needed one. I noticed a couple of themes: eco-dev, racial inequity, and education were top. And I want to ensure as we move forward that addressing our past ills will allow us to develop in communities that'll make Dallas an actual fourth diverse city in the country, right? Realize that. And so it's really important that we get this right. And I just wanted to state that for the record, because there are communities in Southern Dallas, Latinx communities, Black communities that are ready to build their communities, but they have to understand what policies are needed. They have to work collaboratively to make sure that happens. And so I just want to make sure we keep that theme as we move forward to better Dallas as a whole. And I second the adjournment of this meeting.
Okay. Any other comments, I guess, before we conclude? All right, we have a motion by Mr. Bullard, seconded by Mr. Houston to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed say nay. The motion carries. We are adjourned at 10:43 a.m.